Graham Hancock is a journalist and non-traditional archaeologist whose work has exploded into the consciousness of everyday people, using the internet and certain substances to enlighten and guide his exploration through history and lost civilizations.
The Amazon is a colossal mystery. There was a series, not just one impact, but multiple impacts all over the earth.
The story of Atlantis comes down to us from Plato.
It is very hard for archaeologists to explain how that was done.
His work is accused by the mainstream of being pseudohistory, cherry-picking and misinterpreting evidence.
You can say, oh, perhaps they built a ramp and hauled the stones up the ramp. How long a ramp do I need? And the answer is you need a fucking long ramp.
Graham, you're just wrong.
I do my legwork. I do it thoroughly. And because I do it thoroughly, archaeologists are threatened by it.
But with huge gaps in history with little to no knowledge of how things came to be, Graham is pushing back with an open mind.
I would say that it's most important of all to question authority.
So how did a writer and off-the-wall archaeologist become the most divisive figure in ancient history, a psychonaut exploring unknown dimensions, and a beloved enigma in questioning where the fuck we come from?
We should be approaching this problem from many different perspectives and trying to figure out what the fuck caused this extraordinary event that occurs at a pivotal moment in the human story.
If we just blindly accept what the so-called authorities tell us, then we'll never make any kind of progress in ideas. It's essential to keep an open mind to all possibilities and not to be bound down by theories and ideas.
Graham Hancock was born in Edinburgh on the 2nd of August 1950. When he was 3 years old, he and his family relocated to India so his father could pursue his surgical career. He returned to the UK and earned a sociology degree from Durham University in 1973. Graham got his start in the journalism world by working for a number of British newspapers and magazines, such as The Times, The Sunday Times, The Independent and The Guardian. Freshly out of university, he co-edited a newly formed magazine called The New International from 1976 to 1979 and became the East African correspondent of The Economist from 1981 to 1983. During his work for magazines and newspapers, he would release a number of books that would mostly focus on problems of economic and social development. In the 90s, he released a number of books focusing primarily on ancient Egypt and surrounding history, including The Sign of the Seal, Fingerprints of the Gods, The Message of the Sphinx, and The Mars Mystery. Each book takes 2 to 3 years of research and 6 months of writing. And even though his books would sell millions of copies around the world, with every release, he and his work would be labelled as pseudo-archaeology. His work would often require him going into the field to explore the actual monuments that so much of his writing is about.
I don't just sit in an armchair. I get out into the field and investigate in the field what I'm talking about. When I wanted to write a book about sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age and the possibility that structures were submerged beneath the sea level rose 400 feet at the end of the Ice Age. 27 million square kilometers of land that were above water during the Ice Age are underwater now. Well, in order to investigate that, I did 7 years of scuba diving all over the world. I am a boots on the ground researcher. So it's very offensive to me to find a Wikipedia page which says that I'm promoting pseudoscientific and pseudo-archaeological theories. I am a journalist. I do my legwork. I do it thoroughly. And because I do it thoroughly, archaeologists are threatened by it.
In 1994, Graham would make the pilgrimage to Egypt to see and climb the Great Pyramids. After paying off the guards, he and his wife would climb up the 52-degree slope of the pyramid to watch the sunrise, citing it as one of the most remarkable and profound moments of his life. However, while atop of the pyramids, he saw his initials of his grandfather etched into one of the stones.
There I did see, and it's on the south side of the Great Pyramid, the southeast side, overlooking the Boat Museum. And there was the name, initial P and Hancock. And at that time, there was a date beside it, and that date, if I recall correctly, was the 5th of April 1916. My granddad was a chaplain with British forces in Egypt in the First World War, so I had to consider the possibility that it could be him. He was called Philip Hancock.
Oh, wow.
But I couldn't absolutely guarantee that, and I was able to confirm it by finding my grandfather's diaries, which were little diaries about that high, tiny little writing in them. On that date, there was a single line which said, "Climb Great Pyramid today."
Wow.
Now, if you you're wondering how one man could be thinking about such theoretical and high concept stuff all the time, well, that's because, like me, he was stoned pretty much 24/7. If you're ever wondering why I haven't posted in a video in a while, now you know. So make sure to subscribe to the channel so you know when I actually drop a video. It's completely free, so you might as well. From 1987 onwards, his daily relationship with the herb began, stating that he would get high to help with his writing work.
Now, I have some personal experience of this. I've not been addicted to heroin or cocaine, but I had a 24-year non-stop cannabis habit. This started off smoking the herb and laterally vaporizing it, but the basic truth is that for 24 years, I was pretty much permanently stoned. And I enjoyed being stoned. And I felt that it helped me with my work as a writer, and perhaps at some point it did.
However, his cannabis addiction wasn't the only tool he had in his drug quiver to aid his work and research. See, if you're really going to make a career out of theorizing about potential lost civilizations and cataclysmic events, you need to get on the same level as these ancient civilizations, taking part in rituals that these ancient humans may have used to gain a level of knowledge that is now lost. Even if there is a slight chance of understanding how these substances influence or affect humans is worth exploring in Graham's eyes. One of these substances is called Ayahuasca, a South American brew that is used by indigenous cultures and Joe Rogan Extremists as a psychedelic vehicle for tripping balls. Essentially, the brew contains a chemical called DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, a chemical that is naturally created in the brain. More specifically, it's a chemical that gets released before you die. The brew causes intense psychedelic trips, with most users stating seeing fractal elements, entities, entering a completely different realm, and feeling an intense sense of reflection and learning about themselves, with the trip itself only lasting around 10 to 15 minutes. During Graham's first encounter with ayahuasca and DMT, it led him to reflect on his cannabis addiction and his relationship with the herb.
When I first encountered ayahuasca, I'd already been smoking cannabis for 16 years, and almost immediately, ayahuasca started giving me messages that this was no longer serving me, that it was leading me to behave in negative and unhelpful ways towards others. And of course, I ignored those messages for years and years and went back to being stoned 16 hours a day. But that negative behavior that ayahuasca was pointing up did actually get worse and worse. I don't want to put down cannabis, and I believe it's the sovereign right of every adult to choose to smoke cannabis if they wish to do so. But I think I was overusing it. I think I was abusing it, not using it responsibly. And I became more and more paranoid, jealous, possessive, suspicious. I was subject to irrational rages. I often made the life of my beloved partner, Santha, a misery. And when I went down for my regular encounter with ayahuasca in October 2011, I was given the most unbelievable kicking by Mother Ayahuasca. And I was put through an ordeal. It was a kind of life review. And it's not an accident that ayahuasca is the vine of the dead. I was shown my death, and I was shown that if I came to death and what awaits us after death, without having corrected the mistakes that I was making in my life, that it would be a very bad thing to meet for me. And actually, Mother Ayahuasca literally took me to hell. And that hell was a little like this hell painted by Hieronymus Bosch, a truly terrible place, and a little like the place that the ancient Egyptians called the judgment hall of Osiris, where our souls are weighed in the scales in the presence of the gods against the feather of truth, of justice, of cosmic harmony. And I was shown that the path I was walking, my abuse of cannabis and the behavior associated with it, was going to lead me to be found wanting in the judgment, and that I might face annihilation in the world beyond death. So perhaps not surprising, but when I came back to England later in October 2011, I gave up cannabis, and I've never smoked it again since then.
Finding a healthy relationship with the herb again, these days Graham does in fact still smoke up and partake in substances, as can be seen from his appearances on podcasts where he eats shrooms and blazes up with Mike Tyson. The fact he openly admits to his drug use and the use of it in his work probably doesn't help the mainstream scientist's claims of pseudoscience. On the 6th of October 2011, Graham made his first appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience. Rogan, a longtime fan of Graham's books, would be an important figure within Graham's career as the internet age evolved, allowing him a platform to get his ideas across in a digestible manner to the masses. He's made multiple appearances on the show, including debating Michael Shermer, a well-known science writer and founding publisher of Skeptic magazine, a publication focused on investigating pseudoscientific and supernatural claims. Graham has many theories, and it would be impossible for me, someone who's dumb as fuck, to correctly cite every single thing he's stated in his books and work, but essentially I'm going to give you a rough idea what some of his main theories are and the reason why the mainstream opposed to them. One of Graham's main opposing opinions is that he does not believe or agree with archaeologists that the earliest known civilizations arose independently, also known as the Younger Dryas impact theory. He speculates that there was an advanced civilization during the last ice age and that it was destroyed in a natural cataclysm during the Younger Dryas, and that as few survivors travelled the world introducing agriculture, monumental architecture and astronomy to hunter-gatherers, giving rise to civilizations like ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia and Mesoamerica. Studying the ancient world in great detail, another view that Graham has developed was the belief that ancient civilizations arose from shamanism and using psychedelics to explore the human consciousness.
My view is the ancient world had the right attitude to this kind of thing, and the modern world does not, and that we can sit down and learn a lot from the ancient world. A lot of people ask me, you know, Hancock, you've been arguing that there's been a lost civilization in the human story, but what sort of civilization do you think it was? Well, one of the things I think is it was a civilization that used psychedelics. I think it was a civilization that emerged from shamanism, but did not stay at the hunter-gatherer stage, but that took the essence of shamanism and integrated it into a very different kind of civilization from our own, which pursued things in different ways. A lot of archaeologists have said to me, but we don't find any plastic bottles from the Ice Age. That means there was no advanced civilization during the Ice Age. Well, hang on. Maybe an advanced civilization might have decided never to get involved in plastic in the first place. Maybe there would have been a clear choice not to make plastic. Maybe they did things in completely different ways. Maybe they cultivated powers of the human mind that we dismiss and regard as completely unimportant. You know, woo-woo.
Having many critics for his assumption that there may have been advanced civilizations, he clears up what he means and defines as advanced.
I'm actually not talking about a super advanced civilization during the Ice Age. I'm not talking about a civilization that had cell phones or televisions or sent people to the moon. I'm talking about a civilization that had reached a level of knowledge that is above that we would normally expect for hunter-gatherers. And that level of knowledge includes exploration of the world and mapping of the entire world. And part of the evidence I present is ancient maps which show the world as it looked during the Ice Age, and yet which have extremely accurate relative longitudes. Longitude is a problem our civilization didn't crack until the middle of the 18th century. So the fact that there's evidence of a map-making, global exploring civilization during the Ice Age immediately suggests that they had at least reached a level of technology similar to our own level of technology in the mid 18th century. And I wouldn't claim more than that.
When writing Fingerprints of the Gods, Graham was interested in Antarctica, inspired by researcher Charles Hapgood and his book in theory, Path of the Pole.
And he proposed a phenomenon that he called Earth crust displacement, whereby from time to time, the entire outer crust of the Earth, like the skin of an orange, might shift, leaving the core of the Earth in place, so that it could shift like. So if you imagine a very loose orange skin, the fruit is inside, it's staying in place, but you're shifting the skin around it. Well, obviously then, if that happens, Antarctica could have been in warmer latitudes and could have been shifted into colder latitudes.
And how often does this happen?
Well, does it happen at all is the first question. I mean, of all the theories I've looked at and supported, this is the one that I've come in for the most criticism for. And the standard academic response to that is, look, Antarctica's been frozen for millions of years, and that rules out the whole Earth crust displacement argument.
On the 11th of November 2022, Graham's Netflix show, Ancient Apocalypse, would debut. He would go on to promote the show by appearing on the Joe Rogan Experience with Randall Carlson, a podcaster and geotheologist. The show had 8 episodes covering different ancient structures, including the Great Pyramid of Cholula, the megalithic temples of Malta, Bimini Road, and Göbekli Tepe. By casual ancient history enjoyers, the show was received as an eye-opening possibility of what if. However, the scientific and archaeology community didn't think it was enjoyable, labeling it once again as pseudo-archaeology. The Society for American Archaeology objected to the classification of the series as a documentary and requested suggested that Netflix reclassify it as science fiction. YouTuber and archaeologist Mr. Mini Minuteman made a multi-part 4-hour-long lecture video deconstructing the show and Graham's work, concluding that the show discourages critical thinking, among many other things, and that it's essentially propaganda.
I know I mentioned this in a previous episode, but Stefan Milo has a great video going over this whole thing. I highly recommend you check it out as well. He has a wonderful channel, and one of the things that he pointed out, which I thought was really funny, is on this part of the map that is supposedly the coast of Antarctica, it says the place with all the snakes. Which, does that sound more like South America or Antarctica to you? You know, just a little detail that if Graham Hancock had included, you know, people probably wouldn't able to, I don't know, draw their own conclusions. Thank you for pointing that one out, Stefan Milo. I wouldn't have known that one. He also talks about the Ornitius Phineas map, which I did a whole video on, and he draws his Ice Age coastline to fit whatever he wants it to. It's bad evidence. And then he ties his whole video together by making sure to squash and other anyone who may be a little bit skeptical at this point, because he ends off by saying that yet again we are at the risk of incurring the wrath of mainstream academia. Graham, you're just wrong. You don't have to make a bad guy to make everyone too scared to disagree with you when they watch your Netflix special. You haven't even said anything that could be considered evidence yet. You got in a boat to look at rocks with a random guy, and then you got confused by an old map. The way that Graham Hancock's arguments work is he will set up a mystery, give you a really bad piece of evidence, and then vilify. And he'll just repeat that cycle over and over again until you eventually start to be like, huh, you know, maybe this guy does have something going on.
Archaeologists have also claimed that because people don't necessarily have a knowledge base in some of the topics that Graham talks about, it allows him to strategically mislead. However, it wasn't just the mainstream scientific community that he received backlash from. After the release of Ancient Apocalypse, he was accused of racism.
I think it's a desperate strategy by archaeologists. So we didn't succeed in turning people off his work by calling him a pseudo-archaeologist or a pseudo-scientist. Clearly we didn't succeed in turning people off his work because he's got this Netflix show. So what can we do to turn people off his work? Oh, let's call him a racist and a white supremacist. You know, let's look at a couple of indigenous traditions that he reported 20 years ago, and let's say that on the basis of that, Hancock is a racist and a white supremacist. It's a cheap trick. It's a low blow, but that's what I've come to expect in this field. And it's odd the way that this story about the past is getting co-opted by modern American culture wars, which is completely unnecessary.
Since the release of Ancient Apocalypse, he has continued his research, debating a mainstream archaeologist in an upcoming debate on the Joe Rogan Experience. While the mainstream still poo-poo the idea of psychedelics' role in ancient history, the general public are a lot more open-minded to new possibilities, and even if all of his claims would prove to be completely false, at least he actually manages to get people interested in archaeology and human history as a whole. He makes it easy and teaches a valuable lesson about questioning everything. What's so wrong with saying who knows? Because even scientists and archaeologists haven't got a Scooby-Doo about how most of the ancient world operated. Thank you so much for watching this video, it really does mean a lot to me. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below what you want to see next.